Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the White Collar Support Group's Tuesday speaker series. Our special speaker tonight is our friend and White Collar Support Group member, Tom Hardin. More about Tom in a moment. I have a few announcements, a little bit of housekeeping. Tonight is brought to you by the White Collar Support Group. We are the world's first support group uh, founded to help people navigate the white collar justice system and their families as well. We have a meeting every Monday night at 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific. We also have another mini meeting on Thursday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern, all on Zoom. If you know anybody who has a white collar criminal justice issue, please have them get in touch with us at our website. That's prisonist.org. That's prisonist like feminist. We have a bunch of guests coming up in the next few months. I'm going to announce them. In June, on June 2nd, we have PG Sittenfeld. He is also a White Collar Support Group member, and he was a city council member in Cincinnati, and his case went up to the Supreme Court, and they sent it back down for remand, and PG's expecting his case to be dismissed any day. So that's going to be a fantastic conversation. We're going to hear about the inner workings of not only did he wind up going to prison, but what happened when he got out and some of the legal issues that hopefully will lead to his no longer having a conviction. On July 14th, Karen Kelly is going to be our guest. She's a lawyer at Castellanets in Washington, D.C., and she's the former head of the Department of Justice Tax Division. She's going to talk to us about tax, criminal tax, and the juxtaposition between white collar prosecution and tax issues. And in September, on September 29th, we have Adam Clausen just booked. And Adam is served a 20-year bid. And I think he was a guest on Brent Cassidy's podcast. Yes, Brent. Yeah, he was.
Yeah, he was, and he had a much longer sentence than that. It was 213 years, and he served 20.
I suspect they never expected him to go end of sentence on that on
Probably not.
250 years. Probably not. But he will be our guest, and among other things, Adam has gone into business, and he has a nonprofit, and he's recently been named a member of the United States Sentencing Commission Advisory Board. So he's out there advocating for all of us, and he's going to talk to us all about that. And September 29th, when he speaks, is going to be 2 weeks before our annual conference. So our third annual conference is coming up on October 10th. We're in discussions right now with a keynote speaker. And if they say yes, I'm not giving away the gender. If they say yes, then we'll kind of form everything around it. But the theme of the conference is ending the white collar life sentence. And so we all kind of know what that means because we're unfortunately every sentence is a life sentence for all of us. So let me say a few words about Tom from what Tom sent us actually, and then I'll say a few personal words. Here we go. At just 29 years old, Tom Hardin found himself at the center of the largest insider trading investigation in Wall Street history. After being approached by the FBI outside his Manhattan apartment in 2008, the Wharton-educated hedge fund analyst became one of the most prolific cooperating witnesses in securities fraud history. Known by his federal code name, Tipper X, Tom wore a covert body wire on over 40 occasions, helping the FBI build more than 20 of the 80-plus criminal cases in Operation Perfect Hedge, the largest insider trading investigation of a generation. His cooperation contributed to landmark convictions, including the 11-year prison sentence of billionaire Galleon Group founder Raj Rajaratnam. Did I get that right? Rajaratnam, right? So just before we started tonight, I sent Tom a copy of the first email that he and I traded. It was on August 10th of 2016. And we were introduced by our good friend and White Collar Support Group member, Richard Lee. and we were all kind of in this together. At the time we were just starting the support group, and we were trying to figure out how to be of service to one another. And I think we were all scared and being told by lawyers who to speak to, who not to speak to. We didn't know what boundaries we could push, and we also didn't even know. None of us knew if we were going to like make it. We post criminal justice involvement, and we all bonded together and tried to figure it out together. And I want to thank Tom, not only for sending me a copy of his book, which I'm going to hang up, I'm going to hold up right now. Wired on Wall Street just came out, and I'll put the link in chat as to how you can order your own copy. But he put a beautiful inscription for me, and he talks about our support group. I don't know what page it's on, but he does talk about our support group and how the support group was instrumental in helping him on his road back. So Tom is a seasoned speaker. He's spoken hundreds of times all over the world, and on this book tour, he's probably spoken 100 times already. And we're so excited to have him. So Tom Hardin, welcome to our Tuesday Night Speaker Series. Take it away. And if anyone would like to share or ask Tom a question after Tom's done, please put your name in chat and I'll call on you. So there you go, Tom.
No, thank you, Jeff. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And 2016, I was just looking at that email. It seems like just yesterday, and I can't believe it's been in 10 years. And I know you say this a lot, but we were, suffering in silence. When you say that, that's exactly how I felt at that point. So pleasure to be here tonight. I usually give a very formal, dramatic keynote presentation with slides. I told Jeff tonight I don't want to do that. I just want to tell my story to you, sort of go through the highlights of the book and leave plenty of time for questions. So the quick thing on me, and it was in the introduction, I'm Tom Hardin. About 15 years ago, was known as Tipper X. There was this large insider trading investigation focused on the hedge fund industry. It spread out to actually 81 people being prosecuted for securities fraud, which, if you don't know, that's how insider trading is prosecuted in the US. So 81 people were charged. If you picture like portfolio managers, stock traders, analysts, 32 of the 81 were actual cooperators. I was one of those cooperators. I always say, as people here may know, you don't just volunteer to cooperate with the FBI. I wasn't calling them to report myself. You have to be charged, which I was, which I'll get into. And I really had no plans ever to share this story until in 2016, Jeff. I think it was right before that email to you when I just started speaking. The FBI had called me and invited me to speak at the FBI. And as you may know, at least for me, it was always a restricted number, like knowing that was probably the FBI. And so I answered and thought, what do these guys want now? And they told me of the 81 people that they had charged, I was the youngest person and that I made the least amount of money on my trades. And I thought they were rubbing it in. I said, I was actually trying not to get caught. And they said, that's really interesting. Why do well-educated, ambitious people, make these decisions to cross the line? What is the culture? What is the pressure? And so spoke at the FBI, and they encouraged me to kind of go on this journey of make lemonade out of lemons. So that's what I've been doing the last 10 years, kind of just doing the cautionary tale story the last 10 years with companies. Compliance is usually who brings me in. And now that I'm, the next generation behind me is in on Wall Street, speaking to younger people just about how we can make poor decisions, what it looks like. And so I'm happy to follow up later. If anybody's ever thinking about sharing your own story with your industry where you worked, if it was something like that, I'm happy to help. I know I've been able to help a few members just sort of think through that. I think that's how I can be really helpful for you, afterwards. Feel free to reach out. But I'll get into my story now. And again, I'll leave time for questions. Just all the way back, you have to start in childhood with the book. So I'm from Georgia, middle class kid, the oldest of two brothers, 1980s, 1990s childhood. My father spent his whole career at Coca-Cola, dealing with the Atlanta traffic. My mother stayed at home with myself, my two brothers. I was a really good student, big public high school outside Atlanta. First of my family to leave the South for college. I wrote in the book back in the 90s, we only applied to 3 colleges. And my kids are like, what? You're supposed to apply to 20 colleges. It's like, that's not what we did in the 90s. There was 3 colleges, your reach, your middle, and your safety. And UPenn, Wharton was my reach school. And I got deferred and they got in. And so I'm into this Ivy League school. It's just an amazing experience leaving Georgia. I sort of feel like at this point in my life and kind of in my career too, I kind of felt like an outsider, like this guy that doesn't belong, maybe an imposter, and maybe that kind of played in a part in my later decisions and my behavior, but was definitely a fish out of water at this Ivy League school. Got a job in investment banking. So this is going way back to 1999. So if you follow the stock market at all, that was like the dot-com boom for tech stocks, and worked at this investment bank for just a few months, and then got recruited from this investment bank in Los Angeles where I was working to work at a tech stock focused hedge fund in Greenwich, Connecticut around the turn of the century. So I'm working at this tech stock focused fund in Connecticut. I loved investing. There was really nothing like it to me where you have to look at things all around the world, what's going to move stock prices. It felt like a game. And my boss was always pretty forward with me, find stocks that are going to go up, find stocks that will go down that we can bet against. And if I can't do it, he'll just hire the next guy out of the business school. So a lot of pressure pressure to perform all the time for our investors. But I loved the energy of that. I just felt like I had some agency in my career, in my life, and the potential outcome, of my career at quite a young age, 22 years old. But I also became aware that insider trading was rapidly happening, and my boss introduced me to a guy named Raj Rajaratnam when I was 22 years old, and he said this guy is the best tech stock investors there is because he has a lot of these Silicon Valley, CEOs as investors in his hedge fund. Therefore, he gets better information than pretty much anybody. And so I meet this guy who's later one of the most famous people to be charged with insider trading at 22. And I didn't get to know him, but I became aware again that the insider trading, this behavior was pretty rapidly happening kind of in the mid 2000s in the tech stock industry, where tech stock hedge funds would hire people to work for them that had worked at these public companies, so their analysts could call back and get information around mergers and acquisitions and quarterly announcements. So I knew what's going on. It was sort of an open secret where we knew this was happening, but I never felt I had to cross that line. I was always considered a great investor. One of my best ideas I wrote about in the book that I never saw come to fruition was about a year after the Google IPO. I said, boss, we have to own Google and we have to be short any yellow page stock around the world. And so if you're younger, you may not know what yellow pages are, but back in the day, we got these big bricks in our driveways, and it was just sort of clear that Google would put these things out of business. And so that's the only insight you have to have in this career, just one insight to make your whole life, make your whole career. Um, but what happened with my hedge fund, and now I'm 28 years old. I'm just jumping forward in the story a few years. Now I'm 28 years old at a new and final hedge fund. We are investing over a 3-year horizon. But after losing money in the first quarter, my boss walks into my office, closes the door, and says, Tom, I know we're investing longer term, but we just lost money in the first quarter. We have to start looking for shorter term opportunities to make money every month, or we may not survive. Now, when any goal in any business goes from make money just over 3 years to make money every month, of course, the pressure, picks up. I didn't ask him any questions. Are we going to stay within the legal or ethical guardrails? Are we going to sort of do what everybody else is doing, so to speak? Never asked those questions. And then a few months after that meeting, I got a call from another analyst who I knew in the industry. Her name is Rumi Khan. She worked for Raj Rajaratnam, the Sri Lankan billionaire. And I suspected she was always already trading on inside information, but at the time, you didn't get tips unless you provided tips. It was sort of a back and forth. And so that wasn't my world. But anybody here on the call, if you talked to young Tom 20 years ago and said, hey, one person in your life is going to give you some tips that's going to end your career, I could have already told you it was going to be her. Like I just knew in my gut. So when I talk to the next generation today, I say really be careful about who you surround yourself with. Like it's really important to think about who you let into your life, because one person can be the thing that starts to lead you down the wrong path. And so that sort of resonates with the next generation today. And so she calls me up and she says, Tom, you made me a lot of money over the last few years on some great ideas. I have something for you, but you can't tell anybody. Now, That should have set off a red flag, but I thought, what is she going to say? And it's the most straight up stock tip I've ever heard. She said, uh, a Moody's analyst, so at the bond rating agency, not to be too technical, who was roommates with her cousin, told her a company, Kronos, a stock, was going to be acquired in a few weeks. Here's the date. Here's the price. Here's the private equity firm. It does not get much more stark than that. Up to that point, she was always full of rumors, but this doesn't sound like a rumor. This sounds like an exact piece of information. I didn't make any trades that day in Kronos because it sounded like an illegal tip. But later that day, I was talking to a friend outside my firm who worked at a prop trading firm. And this is a guy I hadn't talked to for years, but we had just started talking recently again. And he's down that month and we're talking. And he said, dude, are you hearing anything out there I could take a flyer on, like a short term trade? And I said, you know what? I'm not trading this, but if you want to, this woman just called me, Moody's analyst, Kronos, in a few weeks, here's the event. Just pausing right there, I could now be charged, at least by the SEC, for insider trading for tipping this information. And I haven't even traded yet. And I have no idea what he's going to do with it. It turns out he tells his whole firm. There's actually a guy at his firm who's later one of the big targets of these cases. Name is V. Goffer. His nickname at the firm was Octopussy because he had his tentacles in law firms, accounting firms, banks. If this guy were to start his own fund, it would just be insider trading fund. He would buy 500,000 shares. I would learn later on my tip. The woman that called me had her entire personal account in this stock for this event. I hadn't made any trades yet, but the next day or so, the guy I called me and he said, dude, did you buy some? And as the junior partner at my two-person firm, I could buy a stock in our portfolio and not have to talk to my boss as long as it was less than 1% of the assets we manage for clients, kind of a starter new idea position I had. And I remember calculating and buying a 0.9% position in the portfolio in Kronos. And once I put the order in to buy 14,000 shares of the stock and it was executed, I committed securities fraud, felony right there. And as you probably are aware of the fraud triangle, so there was a need. There was a need for short-term performance. There was this opportunity for me to do that. And half the book is probably all my rationalizations. I said, hey, it seems like everybody's doing it. I'll do it one time. I'm still a good guy and can place one trade at thousands of trades. There was this term I found researching the book called moral licensing, where we do all the good things in life, where we give ourselves massive credit for that. I'm a faithful husband. I go to church. I write checks. I make thousands of legit trades. I can make one bad trade because it doesn't skew the balance. And that was really much part of my thinking. I'll do it one time. Heck, if my boss has a problem with this, he'll storm into my office, pull me out by the neck and tell me never, we don't do this. And so all these ideas were going through my head. And then eventually, um, a few more days went by, and I'm kind of thinking about this. And I thought, let me talk to two friends outside my firm just to bounce it off them. Guys who I thought highly of in this industry, guys I had known since college. And so I called them up and I said, what do you guys think? This Moody's analyst is saying this company is going to be acquired in a few weeks. And I thought they'd say, what the heck are you doing? They both heard me out. And one of them said, I can't believe you even know something like this, Tom. What the heck? I'll take a flyer too. So that's not good. We use this term for insider trading called taking a flyer. So we use euphemisms for the illicit conduct. Never did we call it insider trading because then we feel bad about that. So we said taking flyers, which were small positions. And so it would happen three more times. On the third tip and trade, from her to me to these small stock positions, I was thinking, you'll probably ask the question, why was she giving me this information? I was thinking that too. Like, this is such a great gift of information. And she said, if this is to continue, her source of information, who's out in California, wants $15,000. And so I had some expletives for her. I'm like, that's massively illegal. Like, I had rationalized the trades, but I thought, I'm not getting cash together. Are you up and crazy? I'm not going to do this. And so I said, well, let me see what I can do. It's not going to come from me. I called my friend who I had tipped. He got the cash for me together. And so now I'm walking to LaGuardia Airport with cash, 150, $100 bills in my laptop bag, about to go through security. I thought to myself, I'm not putting my bag through security. I went to the restroom. took all the money out, put it in my shirt, in my waistband, in my socks, and I was going to walk through that metal detector. It was still a metal detector at the time, so it wasn't like the machines today. Metal detector. I walked right up to the metal detector. My face was like a waterfall. The TSA lady said, "Nothing in your pockets," and there was actually nothing in my pockets. So I said, "There's nothing in my pockets." Meanwhile, my face is a waterfall. Went through this metal detector, went to the restroom, took the money up, put it back in the laptop bag. My flight is called to board to San Francisco, and there were actually two TSA security agents at the gate of my flight, randomly stopping passengers. And so I thought, oh my God, they're here for me. And when Group Two was called aboard, they called me over and they went through my laptop bag. And the female TSA agent literally touched the bank envelopes. And she said, "Sir, have a nice flight." So good old TSA. I got in the plane. I thought, what the hell am I doing? I'm never doing this again. But of course, I got to California. I threw the cash at this lady. I said, never again. And she's like, of course you're going to do it again. And so it would happen one more time without the cash payoff. So over 7 months in 2007, every one of these trades was up like 30 or 40% on a non-public, unexpected announcement. In every morning meeting with my boss, he said some combination of, that's great. That's helping us out, but keep me out of it. Don't tell me how you're doing it, or, keeping his distance. So he's being willfully blind. And that further fueled what I was doing looking back because he was my mentor and he's looking the other way. So being willfully blind to what I'm doing, he definitely knows what I'm doing and he's not asking questions to keep distance. Of those four trades, they added $1 million in profits to our hedge fund for our investors. We managed about $100 million for clients. So we were up 31% that year with the insider trading. We were up 30% without the insider trading. So you might think, what the heck's the point of even doing this? It's a good question. My editor at Wiley, she read this. She's like, why did you do this? I mean, that's the whole book's about. So it didn't make sense to her. It doesn't make sense to a lot of people. But of the 1.2 million, what was my personal take on the crime? Essentially, what number did I destroy my entire career for at 29 years old? And that was $46,000. So not 46 million, not 4.6 million. $46,000 as I look back at 29 years old was the price of my career. And there was actually a massive last week, a massive law firm insider trading ring exposed where one of the informants central to the case made $37,000. So I read that and thought, wow, the same type of sort of pattern repeats decades later, where it's not a life changing or a career changing amount of money, of course. So $46,000. Um, that was in 2007. And at the end of 2007, I got a call from her and she was out of breath. Tom, what should I say about these trades? I thought, oh my God, what would I say? She said she had been contacted by the SEC. She said I was fine. Don't worry, they're not onto me. But what should she say? So I told her what she should say. And I thought, once you light the match, like you can't unlight the match. I can't take these trades away. But I tried to put the match out. So I concocted in my head a plan. I might be able to tell the SEC if they were to call me next. However, it's very important to know, like Mike Tyson said back in the day, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. So the SEC didn't call me and say, "Hey, Tom, can you call us back about all your insider trading last year?" Instead, it's now July 8th, 2008. All of those trades from the previous year are out of sight, out of mind, middle of the financial crisis. I'm leaving my apartment in Manhattan to drop off some dry cleaning. I step on the sidewalk and I hear this guy behind me say, "Are you Thomas Covey Hardin?" And the last time I heard my full name was my mother back in Georgia about to whip my butt. And it wasn't my mom on the New York City sidewalk. It was two FBI agents out of central casting, male and female. The wallets are out. Come sit down with us. We sat down in a Wendy's next to my dry cleaner. And he said, "Look, man, we know about your four trades. We know that you were just down in Georgia last weekend visiting your baby nephew Carter for his baptism." And I was, and my head was spinning. And my first thought with the FBI in my face was, oh my God, my dad's going to kill me. What's he going to say when he's going to find out? And I thought, holy crap, my wife's going to leave me. She had no idea about these trades. We just got married. And I thought, oh God, this might impact my career. I think, oh my gosh, I might be going to prison. But it went from dad to prison. And I immediately made implicating statements. Yes, I made those four trades. In fact, there was a $15,000 cash payoff. And he's saying, go on, go on. And he said, I wanted to stop you there, Tom. He said, "Do you know of illicit trading happening on Wall Street?" I'm like, "Guys, it's rampant." He pulled out this web of names of the insider trading tipping charts with the circles and the arrows. I couldn't see the actual names, but he had two big targets at the top. So I assume one of those guys was this guy, Raj Rajaratnam, and I was one of many minnows down at the bottom to be used against the great whites. He folds it up, he gives me his card, and he said, "Tom, you have the opportunity to help us build these cases. It's going to help you out." I took his card and said, "Should I talk to an attorney first?" And he said, "We'll let you know when you can do that." The FBI was pretty upset. I put that in the book. I got a text from an agent or two about that. I'm like, "Well, you shouldn't have said it, or it wouldn't have gone in the book." So otherwise, I think they were okay with it, but that's what they said at the time. I took his card. They said I could only tell my wife and nobody else. I completely violated that. I had converted to Catholicism for marriage, and so I thought the sacrament of confession sounded really good at that time. So I went to St. Patrick's in Manhattan. There was a long line on a Tuesday afternoon, and I had gallows humor, like how many hedge fund guys are in line. I got to the front, talked to the priest, told him everything, and he's like, "Hey, your penance is to basically help the FBI." Now, my advice is also to talk to a lawyer there. Never talk to the FBI. You take their card, but it is what it is at this point. Talk to the priest, but I still had to tell my wife, and that was a Tuesday. I waited till Friday. So Wednesday, Thursday, I know several of us have been in this situation before. For me, I was having panic attacks, bad sweats. My wife knew something was up. I went to work, before she got up. I came home after she went to bed. I didn't want to have to tell her the news. And then Friday, is coming. The weekend's coming. I'm like, I have to tell her. And so after work, how was your week? Young couple, New York City, glass of wine. And by the way, I forgot to mention she had been working at a company called Lehman Brothers, which is now a footnote on Wikipedia in history. So she was still there before it went under. So she was having a hell of a time at work. And I'm about to tell her about, the worst moment. So I said, I just have to get to it. I said, "Sue, Tuesday morning, it was the FBI, 4 trades. I made the trades." And she said, "Can you say it again?" And I said it again. And the way that she took it was that I didn't do anything to hurt her. And I would argue I did because she married the future hedge fund guy, not the future tipper X. But the way she took it, I'm very lucky. And we were able to work it out. It's never easy in these situations, as many of us know. But up to that point, she took it as well as she could, which was a big thing for me mentally. Because I don't think I was suicidal, but 3 people had committed suicide that the FBI approached this way to be informants. I think the suicide rate for informant whistleblowers is 10 times the average population. I don't think it was that dark for me, but I'd hate to think, if she had kicked me out there. So I told her I had a lunch scheduled for the FBI that Monday. I met with the FBI for lunch. I thought they just wanted some few ideas from me, and they had a small piece of metal on the table. And I said, "What's that? One of your BlackBerry batteries?" And they must have thought this guy is naive. Like, this is not a BlackBerry battery, Tom. This is a body wire. And my second job, so to speak, was to help the FBI build these cases. Mind you, again, I hadn't talked to a lawyer. I just decided to follow their orders. Maybe it'll all work out. And so my job, so to speak, was to help them build cases against who were the worst actors. But the challenge was the woman who had tipped me had worn a wire on me, and the guy I had tipped had already done that also. So great friends. But anyways, I said, how can I be of help? And they said, "Who are the worst actors?" I went back to my apartment, made a list of who I thought were the worst actors. Not really up here. It might be a 48-year-old hedge fund manager in Silicon Valley. I'm a 29-year-old analyst in New York. My job was to build relationships face to face. My cover story was to say, "Hey, I'm probably going to lose my job. It's 2008. It's the worst stock market in 75 years." And then be interviewing for a job with them and try to work in, how they got their information, what kind of sources they had, what kind of people were tipping them information. I was very clumsy. There was no training for this. I was sent in for my first meeting in Silicon Valley with the hedge fund manager. We sat down at a Starbucks and I got right to it. "Tom, nice to meet you. Yeah, I'm probably going to lose my job. And by the way, how do you get your inside information?" If anybody here heard that, me saying that, I'm sure you'd end the conversation and leave. And I went back. The FBI was always at the Starbucks, sitting next to me or the table next to me, just making sure I wasn't sliding the target a piece of paper saying I'm wearing a wire, which would have obstructed justice. I didn't do that. The FBI would listen to it later and say, "Tom, you're doing a terrible job." And I said, "Hey guys, it's my first time doing this. You actually gave me no training. There was no training back in college for this." And eventually, They gave me sort of some coaching tips. They said, ask a question or make a statement and say nothing. So anybody here in sales, the classic sales negotiation where you make your offer and you say nothing. And then eventually, after 3 meetings, the target would say just enough about where they had a contact or who was giving them information. But it took sort of this 3 meeting dance, I called it. And I built an entire framework around this that years later, I met an author who had interviewed many CIA officers. And he's like, Tom, what I was doing was basically what these CIA guys are trained for, radical empathy, verbal mirroring, that type of thing. And I figured it out on my own. So this went on for 2 years. Some guys, would get to it, but it was really an awkward thing to be doing. Just making up a name for one situation. I'd say, hey, Jim, good to see you. Remember 3 years ago when you traded on inside information? Like, what would you say if you were ever asked as to why you did that? Of course, they changed the subjects. One guy high up the list, I got him in 15 conversations. He lived in Greenwich, Connecticut. So I got really creative in the book. I call him Mr. Greenwich. I got him in 15 conversations. He would say nothing. He'd always change the subject. One Sunday afternoon, he gave me a call and he said, Tom, we need to have dinner tonight. We need to talk. So I called the FBI. I said, this guy wants to have dinner. They got super excited. They met me at Grand Central Manhattan. I took the train to Greenwich, Connecticut. This guy picked me up at the train station and he said, Tom, good to see you. I brought swim trunks for you. We're going swimming at my mother's house. So the final seasons of Sopranos was running that summer. All these ideas were going through my head. I played it cool. I said, let's go swimming. We drove to this old house in Greenwich. He starts disrobing in this room. He wants to see if something's taped to my chest that was in my front pocket. I excused myself, went to the restroom, took the wire out, put it in my jeans, put these swim trunks on. So the two of us were walking out to this pool. It was so quiet. I saw a shovel against the house, a hole in the ground. I thought, oh my God, he's going to try to kill me or something. And he was just having landscaping done. And we got into the swimming pool and he grabs a tennis ball and we're playing this awkward game of catch. It's the worst game of catch I've ever played. I'm dropping the ball and he's pouring it on psychologically. And after a few minutes, he said, Tom, I've been acting kind of weird, which I had. He said he spoke to a lawyer and he has one question for me and I have to answer it truthfully. I was so scared. I was like, what do you want to know? I was going to give it up. And he's like, okay, Tom, his big question was, have you been approached by the SEC? And truthfully, I could say, no, not the SEC. I was trying to help him. He doesn't catch that nuance. He starts making implicating statements. Obviously, this was not recorded. He was never charged by DOJ or the SEC because I didn't record that conversation. And up until a few years ago, he was still managing outside money for investors, and he never had me as a guest speaker at his company. So that was the scariest moment. By the fall of 2009, the first arrests happened on Wall Street. The first 20 people were arrested, and then and the charging document when those 20 names came out in the Wall Street Journal, there was one name not released, and they called this person right in the middle, Tipper X. And this was on a Friday morning. My wife had just given birth to our first daughter that Monday. So we're at home up with the baby. As any new parents are, the baby doesn't sleep, we're up. And Friday, the FBI calls and says, turn on the TV. 20 guys are arrested. Tipper X. And I asked the FBI, hey, am I Tipper X? And he's like, that's you. You should talk to an attorney now. So here I am, almost 2 years into this. I looked up Martha Stewart's attorney. He was probably the highest priced guy in Manhattan. And so I wasn't going to trial. He luckily gave me a referral to a guy on Third Avenue that sounded better than Park Avenue. And so I called Larry Krantz, the guy I eventually hired, great guy. And I said, hey, Larry, I've been doing this for 2 years with the FBI. They said, we should talk. We have to proffer now with the prosecutor. And he's like, okay, I'll take the file from your attorney. I said, Larry, I haven't spoken to an attorney before. He said, Tom, you're supposed to talk to me the first day the FBI approached you. I said, Larry, it's my first time doing this. So basically, which was true. It was time to self-surrender downtown at 26 Federal Plaza. So I go through that. I remember walking into the courtroom to give my guilty plea and just seeing that document where it says, United States of America versus Thomas Hardin. And some of the tricks that the agents had played with me was like, I was doing this for my country, like some patriotic duty. I had to wear a wire. So whatever games they could play with me. And I got so optimistic in my head. I thought maybe I'll be like that guy, Frank Abagnale from the movie Catch Me If You Can. Maybe I'll do this for the FBI and then they'll hire me. Like that's not how it works. Or maybe they're gonna drop the charges. We all know that's not how it works. And so they were gonna keep using me. And at this point, I had worn a wire 48 times. And my lawyer's like, are you the center of this investigation? I said, I don't think I am. I think it's Raj Rajaratnam and Steve Cohen. And he's like, they got a lot of flesh out of you for 46 grand. And the FBI kept pushing on me. Who else? I told my attorney, I'm exhausted. I am done. I can't do this anymore. I had left my job. I was a stay-at-home dad at that point. And the FBI said, no, you're not done, Tom. There's two more guys we want, like my two friends I had tipped. I said, those are good men. I'm drawing the line there. And the FBI said, fine, we're drawing the line with you. Your name's coming out tomorrow. So the worst day, I think, in all of this, I know we all have our worst days through the journey. For me, at least, it was Wednesday morning when Tipper X, as Thomas Hardin, is on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. My wife had just gone back to work from maternity leave on that Monday. So an emotional moment for any working new mother. So on Monday, she's back at work, showing pictures of the baby to her colleagues. And she's had to keep this secret with me. Like we couldn't tell anybody for almost 2 years. So if you think about the white lies, how's Tom's job search going? Well, not great. He's an FBI informant. Like we couldn't say anything. So Monday, she's showing these pictures. Wednesday, her husband's name is on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And the one time she really lost it, understandably, was when she came home from work that day. There was some, idiot reporter that was at the house I wasn't letting in. He had left. The phone's ringing nonstop. And then she walks through the door, grabs the baby out of my arms, and says, I can't believe you did this to us. So as a man, as a husband, now as a father, I never felt worse than that because now I realize my actions, my decisions, my trades had consequences for everybody I love with my name out there. So I know we all go through this to some part in our journey, and that kind of set off a pretty massive shame spiral, I would say, for me for several years, because now my name is out there as Tipper X, persona non grata, stay at home dad. As I wrote the book, I wish I took more pride in that role as a stay-at-home parent, but I was so self-flagellating. Like I'm a POS, I should be doing more than this. And then, some of the best days when I look back when I was happiest was just picking up stuff off the floor and, teaching the kids how to walk. And so I was really emotional writing it because I just thought, God damn, I should have just like really savored this more at the time and not so been in my head about what I should be doing with my life because I couldn't, as we know, it's hard to get back on your feet going through this, and I wish I picked myself up sooner. One of the things that helped me, I'm just if it helps people, I was reading so many self-help books. I don't recommend those. I actually had a book event a few months ago at Barnes and Noble, and I said, "Oh, the self-help book here section is terrible." They're like, "Don't say that." But I'm like, actually, maybe there's a few good ones. But I said, for me, it just made me think about myself, and I just got in my head and was spiraling even worse. And so one day my wife was like, why don't you go volunteer at the church and be of service? Why don't you go try to help people and stop thinking about poor me? And so I went to our church and started being of service, started volunteering. That was a huge help for me. As we all know, just it gives yourself some perspective. And then I kept, worrying about when I'd find a job. I became, pretty heavy for my frame. And then she signed me up for a 5K race. I started losing weight. 5Ks became half marathons. I started training for marathons. And what training for these road races helped me to do is just have structure to my life. We had no idea when I'd be sentenced. If anybody's ever had a sentencing date that continued to get pushed out and pushed out, like we had a sentencing date and then it kept getting pushed out for years and years. So that kept happening. I started running. I will say I got way too much into running. Like I was running 100 miles a week. So it was a good outlet because I'm like, this is the only thing I could control. I did get into stoicism, just focus on what you could control. So I'm like, I could run my face off every day, but it also helped me not have to deal with actually my future professional life because we bought the house on double income, so I was going to have to work at some point. But I'm like, just running these races, ran ultra marathons, did all this stuff, but it still wasn't helping me as much. Other than like it did, it's very meditative, it clears your head, but I wasn't bouncing back like I had hoped. And then eventually, I was finally sentenced 7 years after the FBI approached me on the street. So a big part of my 30s were basically gone, just waiting to be sentenced. I tried at the time. Drop shipping was kind of new. So if anybody's ever done that or heard of that, where I would buy things on Alibaba in China and list them on eBay, and I thought maybe I could scale this up. Then my Chinese supplier was hijacking my price listing. I tried doing a real estate deal, but people said, "What'd you do before this?" And I said, "Just don't Google me." And if you have to say, don't Google me, it's not great. And so I really had a hard time figuring out how I'd make a life again professionally. And so eventually I'm sentenced 7 years later. The judge, I will say the FBI wrote a great 5K letter, which is a letter that talks about all the cooperation. So I think that really helped me out. And the judge said, just go on with your life. So I got probably the lightest sentence that I could have gotten, which is called time served. And so I wasn't, anything worse than that, but still had to take, the conviction. So the securities fraud conviction, my lawyer, as we know, said it's going to be very hard still just because your sentencing is done to find a job. There was an AP reporter at the courtroom who said, "Can I write a story about you losing all this weight, running ultra marathons, stay-at-home dads? It's interesting." So she wrote the article, and then there was a podcast at the time that was I think one of the first like 50 podcasts ever, called the Rich Roll podcast, where the guy was also like an ultra marathon runner. His producer saw it, and he invited me up to be on the show in 2015. So one of the rawest form of this conversation I've ever had was like 2 days after sentencing with Rich on that podcast. I was completely lost. I had no idea what was going to happen. I was just running, and he's like, "Well, maybe that'll lead to something." And so this was happening, and then a year after that, in 2016, my phone rang, and it was a restricted number, and the FBI always called me with a restricted number. And I thought, oh my God, what do these guys want now? My wife had stayed with me up to that point, but she must have been thinking, what did you do now? I said, I can't believe the FBI is calling. What could it be? And so I answered the phone, and they said, "Hey, how's it going, Tom? It's David Chavs at the FBI." I said, "It's not great. I just found out I couldn't coach my daughter and pass the background check in soccer, and she's 5, and I had to explain that to her. But otherwise, things are great. But again, it's all my own decisions, nobody else's fault but mine." And he's like, "I'm sorry to hear that. Would you come speak at the FBI? You were the youngest guy that we charged at the 81, and you made the least amount of money." And so I spoke at the FBI, and they said, "Why don't you go try to make lemonade of lemons? Why don't you share this story with the next generation of finance people to start there and see where it goes?" And so at first I was emailing universities just to get comfortable speaking. If anybody's, shared your story on the stage, you have to be very vulnerable, and it's really hard to do. Just to tell people, hey, here's, something I did that I'm not proud of, or whatever it is. Like, you really have to. It's hard to be on the stage and own that, and get through that. And so I started doing it. I figured colleges and libraries in my county in New Jersey were lower risk. Like, if I screwed up and bombed, nobody would know. So I started speaking at colleges and libraries, and then eventually there was a conference that had me speak. They heard about me, and there was a company, some lady in the audience. She's like, "How much you charge to speak?" I had no idea what to say. I called our friend Walt Pavlo, who was on this journey, and I said, "Walt, what do I say?" And he gave me a number, and I quoted this lady a number. And once I got paid one time to do this, my wife had been working another job after Lehman on a 2-hour commute because she had to work because I couldn't work. I told her, "Sue, you can quit your job now." And she said, "What are you effing crazy? We have like 15 months of cash left until we have to sell the house." I'm like, "I have to make this work." And so that's the first time I feel like I really owned it totally, completely. I have to make this work somehow, make, meaning out of the wreckage. And so I started speaking around New York City through 2017. And it's turned into almost 700 talks in 13 countries. And about a year and a half ago, Wiley Publishing reached out and said, "Hey, man, you should write the book." And I said, "I'm not sure how much I can say about these cases." And so I wrote the book, and they changed a lot of names. Their legal department was on it, and so it's been really fulfilling to have it out in the world the last few months. But I will say, for me, again, going through this, especially this last part, the years before speaking, like, I had to really fully own my decision to take responsibility. For years, I would say, why there was one year where HSBC wrote a $3 billion check to the government for laundering El Chapo's money through New York, and there was no felonies. I'm like, what the hell's happening? And I showed it to my wife, and Sue was like, "Hey, is that helping you find a job?" So she really held my feet to the fire. So I had to fully own it, and really say, yes, I made these choices and I have to own it. And they weren't mistakes, right? They were actually bad decisions. Um, I had to reach out to people and get help. I should have done that much earlier. As we know, you figure out who your true friends are in this situation. So 4 people reached out to me, and they said, "Hey, we saw what happened," and they weren't babying me. They said, "Hey, you really effed up, and now what are you going to do? Your wife's staying with you. You have 2 kids. What are you going to do now?" And so they really held my feet to the fire, not saying, "Poor Tom," say, "Hey, you got to figure it out." And the hardest part for me, and I'd love to hear if people are willing to share, the hardest part for me was self-forgiveness. And for years, I was in this awful shame spiral. Like, I'm a piece of shit, forgive the language, I did a bad thing. Whereas I was speaking at a conference, it was still raw. And the event planner said, everybody gave you good reviews, but they all of a sudden the comments, you're not doing well. And she's like, you're dealing with shame and guilt. I said, what's the difference? She said, shame again is what I said. And she said, guilt is maybe you're a regular person who made the wrong choice, but you're not inherently not meant to be here. And that for me was a massive mental unlock in terms of the path towards self-forgiveness. But thank you tonight, everybody, for your time. And I'm happy to answer your questions now or follow up offline. If you yourself are thinking about writing your own memoir, I have a lot of do's and don'ts now going through the process. Happy to share that. And especially, I know Craig and I now talk about this a lot. If anybody, wants to share your own story with your industry, if that's something that might work for you, I'm happy to share my playbook and see, be of service. So thank you.
Tom, thank you so much. That was incredible. Every time I hear your story, I get the chills. And by the way, I've also had the opportunity to watch Tom actually give a presentation to a company where he does the full yeah, he does full presentation with the PowerPoint deck and everything, and you do a brilliant job. I think you did that for us, didn't you do that? Didn't you speak for us a couple of
Yeah,
years
last
ago?
time I did the whole PowerPoint of the airport, the swimming pool, and all
Oh
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that well, yeah. It was at any rate. I'm really glad you told the story tonight. So if anyone would like to ask Tom a question or share, please put your name in chat, and I will call on you. But Tom, I'm going to ask you the first question. Um, uh, so tell me um what the effect was and how you got your children through this.
Yeah. So it was um it was interesting. So the FBI approaches me on the street. Sue and I were house hunting in Bergen County when the FBI approached us, and we said, you know what? She was very optimistic. Like, all right, this isn't great, but Tom, you'll figure it out. Let's still buy the dream house. So it wasn't a great decision at the time. Start the family planning plan when she was 30. We're going to start trying for kids. We were good at trying, and so she got pregnant, and so my daughter is born again the week that Raj Rajaratnam, all these things happened. So there were still like weren't really around in the beginning of it, but then as a stay-at-home dad, again, as I mentioned, I wish I took more pride in that role. They didn't. It really didn't dawn on them until my oldest was 5 and said, "I'm only going to play soccer if you can coach me." And if anybody's had this same thing happen, where we checked the box, but I explained to the commissioner, look, it's like nonviolent. It was years ago. And for whatever reason, he said, oh, we have insurance and felons can't coach. And so that was trying to explain to her, while all the other dads were running out there was tough. And then by 3rd grade, she Googled, Tom Hardin criminal on her Chromebook in elementary school. And I guess the principal saw that and he knew my story. He's like, maybe it's time to tell her about it. And so I said, how do you explain it to the 3rd grader? And I said, dad did something bad, but now he tries to help people not do that bad thing. How else can I say it? And she's like, oh, you did something bad. What was it? And I tried to explain insider trading. And then eventually, Jeff, I don't really think they understood it until last year, speaking on the cruise ship. They were actually there, and the girls are now 15 and 13 then. So they're both teenagers. And my oldest walked up to me after sharing this story. And she said, wow, one decision can really impact your life. And that's why that's why you're always tough on me. And you say you're not my friend, you're my dad. I'm like, that's exactly it. So I think now it's a positive thing that they can learn from, especially as teenage girls. But when they were younger, it was really hard to explain.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I know that's something that we all share, that our families and all. In fact, my granddaughter just turned 13 and her bat mitzvah is in a month. And how could she not have seen me on Google already? And she
Right,
must want
right.
to talk to me about it. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right. We're gonna go to the chat. First is Craig and then Stuart.
Tom, I've heard your story before and I'm always fascinated by it, so thank you so much. And for anybody who hasn't read Tom's book, can't recommend it enough. It's a phenomenal read. I was laughing, I was crying. I mean, it's just so well done, Tom. So kudos to you on
Thanks,
that.
Craig.
I am curious because so my book is coming up on its 5-year book anniversary,
Mhm.
May 25th, and it never ceases to amaze me. There's surprises. There are things that I never thought, and I'm not going to share because I want to hear from you. Is there anything that has surprised you since the book has come out that you didn't anticipate? And like maybe it's how
Oh,
people receive it or comments or just how it's impacted your life, whatever it may be.
yeah, I guess there's a couple things. It actually just comes to mind in the last couple of months where like who is picking up the book, who's reaching out. Of course, there's a lot of individual people, as you know, that will read and email you or message you, their own personal reflections. But one thing that happened was several book clubs around the country have picked it up, and these are, 90% female, I think, are book clubs today. And so they picked up a Wall Street memoir. Like no book clubs picks up a Wall Street memoir ever, but it wasn't about Wall Street. Like they were really into the relationship dynamics with myself and Sue, my wife. And I wasn't really expecting that. Like it's definitely part of the book, as you see, like she's a big part of it, but I was expecting it more to be like, I don't know, my like Fortune 500 speaking clients would use it as a cautionary story, which they still do. And, we speak about that, but really like the amount of book clubs who have picked it up. And I think that's also helped the sales of the book. And these are, again, 90% female audiences who usually wouldn't be drawn to the Wall Street story. And so they have reached out to Sue. Several of them have reached out to have her, come talk at their book club. So I wasn't really expecting that, when I wrote the book.
Yeah, that's a big one. By the way, I spoke with my aunt's book club. It's a lot of fun if you feel
Oh,
like doing it.
no, I am. I do have a book club coming up in I think it's an Alpine, New Jersey book club. So maybe get some speaking gigs out of that.
I hear they have a book club at Lewisburg. All right,
Okay.
let's see. Next is Stuart, and then next is Stuart. We'll figure out the next one. Go ahead, Stuart.
Hey Tom, hey, thank you. That was that was fantastic, but I'm also getting a little bit PTSD from your story because I can
Yeah.
completely relate, especially that emotional when the FBI sat you down in the Starbucks and you're talking to them and you're like, blah, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I had the Postal Inspection Service come to my house, and I thought they were, well, I knew there were some issues with an escrow that I was working on, and I thought they were coming to talk to me about it. So it's kind of different, but the same. So I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
come on in, get my kid off the PlayStation, sit down with them. And they're asking me about the transaction. Oh, yeah, I know why you're here. Da da da. Well, tell me more about what you do. And I'm just talking, and I'm an attorney, moron. So I'm sitting there talking to them, and then it slowly turned toward me, like, well, why did you do this? And what about that? And you saw the red flags. And
Mhm.
that's when I was like, wait a minute, you're talking about me. And next thing I knew, they stand up, they hand me a target letter. Don't talk to anybody. Yeah, yeah. So it's very similar. And they walk out. And I'm sitting there with my mouth dropped open, going, oh shit. Oh
Yeah.
shit. So like what you're talking about, like,
Yeah.
oh my God, your life flashes. What is my family going to think? I mean, my dad worked for the NSA. My brother worked for the NSA. I have FBI, people in the FBI I went to law school with. I mean, I'm a patriot. I'm not a
Yeah.
I'm not a criminal, So I'm having
Right.
the same sort of things that you went through. And it was one of the dumbest moves I ever made. Now, they didn't ask to wear a wire, but I immediately contacted an attorney. It took me a bit, did the pro offer, tried to figure out what was going on. He did the pros and cons. Is it worth going forward? Of course, I'm like, yeah, I'll cooperate. I mean, you're not allowed to say that in prison because somebody will kill you. But it's like, no, I'm pissed that I'm in this position. Yeah, but they didn't care about that. So just like what they drug you around with this wire for 48 times, I had an attorney and I was like, look, I'm willing to give you everything. They wanted me to testify, but the deeper they got into what I actually did, they weren't happy. They would have been I would have been better off if I would have been the guy who was like, yeah, I got some money, I got millions in the bank, and we were doing. No, I, I didn't do any of that. I wasn't doing that. I gave them everything I could to paint the picture of what I did and what they were doing, but they wanted more out of me. They wanted me to be someone who really was in the thing. And because I couldn't
Mhm.
do that, they didn't want to use me at trial. So when it came
Mhm.
time to my sentencing hearing, it helped a little bit. I mean, maybe 15%, but they still slammed me with 4 years. And I mean, I was shocked. My attorney was shocked. I mean, he looked at me and he's like, "Oh shit! I thought maybe a year and a half, something. four
Yeah.
years. I had the worst judge. I had to hang him high, Harry, down in Richmond, and it's there's nothing you can do about that. But
Yeah.
that visceral reaction that you were talking about, that of like spinning on that. That's really interesting. Um, well, I'm glad that you made it through it. I'm earlier on in the stage than where you're at now. That's definitely something that I'm leaning toward doing as far as I already have a memoir done. I'm working
Okay.
on, I've been editing it on my own here and there. I've got agents that are looking at it right now. But my goal would be I want to give back
Yeah.
exactly the things you're talking about, but maybe from a different angle, from my own angle. I'm not a Wall Street guy, but the
Yeah.
willful blindness is exactly what they got me on. What your
Right.
boss would have been, that's what they got
Hmm.
me on. So I'm trying to piece together what to do. So when you're talking about you're trying to get some work and doing this and doing that and finding, I'm Catholic also, so going to church and doing these things and helping the youth, that's all fine, but that's not enough, right?
Right. Right.
So I feel I'm going through what you went through, but I
Hmm.
love the fact that there's hope on the other end of it. And look, I talked to a lot of people here. We have great meetings. Jeff's been fantastic. All these people have, say the same thing. You just got to stick in there. You got to keep going,
Yeah.
and that's the main thing. But you are correct. Going back to the FBI, get an attorney first. Do not talk to
Yes.
anybody. Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to save your ass, but
Right.
why make it worse? Why give them information you don't have to give them? And that's not thinking like a criminal. That's thinking like somebody being smart. That's,
Yeah.
we are all
That's right.
entitled to a defense. So that's very interesting,
That's right.
Tom, and I really appreciate it. And I ordered your book, so I'm looking forward to
Oh,
reading
thank you,
that.
Stuart. Definitely, let's connect and have a chat again. Because I'd love to hear more about what your book and what you're looking at.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Okay? Thanks.
Just to be clear, everybody, Tom does, he is available for anybody who wants to get into a speaking career or if you want to publish a book. He's very accessible. I mean, he's very busy right now on the road, but very accessible. And
Yeah.
we've sent a lot of people to talk to him, and he's given them great advice. So thank you for that, Tom. I really appreciate it.
Of course,
Next
sir.
is Brent and then Lucky.
Well, Tom, I love your story, and the way you tell your story is fantastic. And I can understand how people would want to talk to your wife because, for those who were lucky enough to have a good mate, man, they go through so much. And I know your story on how it all transpired, and it's you look back at that. I mean, I look at my wife Julie and how she just championed herself through. And we had have 3 daughters, and that became the kind of the role model of how they got through their life, of how do you handle a storm. But I think what's really incredible about your story is that each and every time, even in the wrong times, you were stepping into the unknown. And you stepped into the unknown when the FBI told you, hey, you're with us. Either you're 29 years old, you're coming with us, and you stepped into that not knowing anything, not talking to an attorney,
Yeah.
and and just walking into
Yeah.
a wild, wild west. And then again, you being a guy that wasn't happy where you were, being in this stay-at-home dad, but being with your kids, but then stepping in the unknown again of not being a speaker, not knowing anything about being a speaker. Um, it's a whole different world. I mean, completely unknown world. And you stepped into it, and you stepped into it a way like I'll do it a little bit at a time, and you got really good at it. And as you got good at it, you created confidence, and the unknown became known. And I think that's one of the things that all of us need to understand as we go through this crazy journey that we're in after we get released is most things that we're going to be stepping into. Um, Even though we were maybe really accomplished people before the storm or the nightmare, is that we're going to have to step into the unknown, and the unknown is going to be the thing that you're going to have to figure out as you're jumping off the cliff and building the plane on the way down. But I so admire, Tom, how you've just been able to step into it. And I think it's such a admirable thing that you've been able to do, and you've done it over and over again. And this group, I think, really appreciates that from you, that just do it. It's like Nike says, just do it.
Yeah. Thank you, Brent. That's I never really thought about it that way, but you're exactly right. And even like I think in the, a lot of it was not discomfort. I chose discomfort. I went through and then learned so much about myself, just going through these hard times. And like you said, just looking forward. Windshield mentality, not rear view, just windshield. Just look through the windshield, and that's and for me, I think the speaking was a function of just be of service, and that was my wife's advice: just be at service. And that started at church, and I'm lucky being of service turned into something now as a second career. But it wasn't like, let me go make money speaking. It was just, hey, this story is of service, and thank God it connected on the other part of the commercial opportunity. But that's exactly what it was. And it was like, I was, like you said, I was an introverted financial analyst. I'm not a guy on stage. Like, that's not what I do. And even my family, I've got, three women in the house. Like, they can't believe I'm the one who's a professional speaker because I never say anything at home, right? So it's sort of not, it's still, I still get nervous, being on stage even 10 years into it. But yeah, I learned so much about myself.
Thank you, Brent. Next is Lucky.
Great. Thank you, Tom, very much. That was an excellent story there, and we appreciate you sharing that. I would love to catch up and visit about my story and how to work this in. I was actually went to trial and got a Rule 29 acquittal after the prosecution rested. However, it was about a 7-year investigation that absolutely destroyed me and my parents financially and things. I feel like there had to have been lots and lots of honeypots and just informants and things. I feel like the tactics were just relentless. Somebody told my father that I was laundering money, or told my dad's business partner that I was laundering money through his restaurant. He and his partner split up. He gave him 50 grand. He should have gotten 500 for his ownership in that. So we were just really devastated. But I think I've got a pretty good story to tell. I'd like to be able to use it to help some people, and I'd love to visit about it, and also kind of some do's and don'ts and what to say and not to say. I don't want to piss them off too much, and I'm trying to rebuild. I want to try and figure out what to do now too, and I definitely want to help others. So
yeah, let's definitely connect, Lucky. I'll put my email in the chat for anybody, but I'm on LinkedIn too, very active, and so just pin me on there and we'll set up a call, because I can talk through all this, like you said, the do's and the don'ts, and just what we can all do with our stories.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Lucky. And we're running out of time. So I'm just going to just pitch Tom's book here. Make sure everyone knows it's Wired on Wall Street, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whatever site you want to buy a book on. Here it is. And a fantastic read. And not only that, for those of us who have gone through it, there's life lessons that are universal in here, whether or not you've gone through a criminal justice issue, because everybody has life-altering experiences, and how Tom got through his is just amazing. So, Tom, thank you so much for being so generous with us this evening, and for always being available to our group and to anyone who asks for help. You can reach Tom. Tom, because people who are watching this on YouTube or on our website won't see the chat. So it's at Tom.
Oh yeah.
Is it Tom.Hardin?
Hardin, Hardin @gmail.com is my personal email, or LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, it's just connect.
That's great. Thank you, Tom. Blessings to everyone. Have a wonderful night. Thanks, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.